Over the last year, I've built, recorded and commissioned 7 bike builds. Many mistakes were made, but without mistakes, there is no growth. And there wouldn't be this video either, because I'm about to explain all those little issues, the nuances, the things that are easy to get wrong so that you can avoid them in the future. Number 1, frame sizing. You need to pick the correct frame size, because the last thing you want is to be getting your leg over a giraffe every time you get on your bike. You will also encounter some serious issues with the bod if your frame is too big or too small. Your joints will be complaining basically. Number 2, order of events. Now before you go waving your tool around like a madman on the loose, you best work out what you were doing first. Why, you ask? Because most things that you do will have a knock-on effect to the next thing. For example, working out the fork spacers requires the wheels to be on the bike so that you can stand the bike up. You don't want to put the bottom bracket in before you've routed the cables through the frame. So having a clear order of events keeps you on the straight and narrow and will force you down a logical path. Number 3, seat post. If like me, you get your bike stand out and it has a horizontal jaw and you think, oh, those juicy jaws will grip the tube of my frame nicely, don't do it. The last thing you want to do is put all your bicep power through the lever, which is transferred into your top tube, and you hear a nice little crack. Instead, put the seat post into the frame first, tighten it up, and then use a clamp to grip the seat post. The seat post is designed to carry our fat arses around. A little grip from a bike stand isn't going to cause much of an issue. Number 4, carbon grip on the seat post. Now, if you were using a carbon seat post with a carbon frame, use carbon grip to do exactly that. Help the grip. The last thing you want is to be riding down the road, hit a pothole, and your seat slips, which I'm guessing would result in a sucker punch to basically your precious area. And we don't want to put ourselves through that. Number 5, cutting the fork steerer. Now, if you buy a frame set, you will need to cut the fork steerer to length. Now, to do this, you need to do a few things. You need a dry fit first, so you put everything on the bike, mark where you need to cut the fork steerer, taking into account things like the compression plug and the actual compression needed for the headset. Now, you use water suppression as well when you're cutting through it if it's carbon, because carbon dust is not very good friends with your lungs. Now, follow this golden rule. Measure twice, cut once. If you cut it too short, game over, my friends. You will have a fancy ornament that you can turn into like a water feature in your garden or something. Number 6, shifter position. Now, when you mount the shifters on the bars for the first time, mount them a little lower than where you think they will finally end up. That way, when you have done all your cable routing and everything is cut to size, you can move them upwards into position, giving you some slack in the cables. If you mounted them too high, for example, done all the cabling, take out all the slack, and then when you come to move them down, you're going to be pulling the cables tighter and there might not be enough cable. Number 7, cable routing through the frame. If they are internally routed or even semi-routed, you're in for a treat. Here's some tips for you. Gear cables are thinner and have less rigidity, so do these first because it's easier to push a thicker brake cable through after you've done the gears. A cheap Amazon tool like this Risk tool makes the world of difference. Route the rear gear and the rear brake cables through the frame from back to front. It's much easier than trying to route the cables through the head tube and then out at the rear through the chainstays through a tiny little hole. Make sure you know how your cable route around the bottom bracket is going to be. From my experience with road bikes, we normally go over the top of the bottom bracket, but it does depend on the frame. Kinks are also your enemy. Do your best to eradicate them. Think about a garden hose not squirting how you want because you've got about 400 kinks in it, even though you left it in perfectly good condition. If you're not spending your extra pennies on your gas and electricity bill this winter, then consider getting an electric group set. The irony. Less cables to route and perfect shifting every time. 8, brakes. Now, not all brakes are made equal. The disc versus rim brake will go on and on like the chicken and egg forever, but the reality is you press the lever, you stop. As long as that suits your needs, then buy what you like. We all know disc brakes better though. So first you have a decision to make: mechanical, so there's a cable running from the front to the back, or hydraulic. If you're going for rim brake, then mechanical it is. Disc, I'd recommend hydraulic. The difference with hydraulic is the amount of effort it takes to pull the lever and the feel you have. It's much more gradual and it's much easier to pull the lever. So especially good people with smaller hands, for example. And once you try it, you won't go back. I won't go back now that I have hydraulic disc brakes. That brings us nicely on to number 9, which is hydraulic disc brake maintenance. Now, hydraulic maintenance is far easier than you think. It sounds complicated, I thought it was, but it's a simple idea really. A couple of tools and some YouTube videos later, and you'll be thinking about tackling your car brakes next. Disclaimer, definitely don't do that. Number 10, bottom bracket, the land of thousands of different standards and sizes. Normally you will get one with your frame, but if you don't, look at the manufacturer's website, check the standard and purchase the correct one. Some are press fit, they are pressed into the frame with a bearing press. Some are screw fit, they are screwed into the frame. Some things to note, both bottom brackets obviously have 2 halves. Now if you are press fitting, do one side at a time for more control. With threaded bottom brackets, the right side of the bike is usually a reverse thread, so you do it up anti-clockwise. Use grease to prevent squeaking to make sure you can get the bottom bracket out after years of abuse. With a threaded bottom bracket, they need to be done up to the correct torque spec ideally. A big torque wrench like this one that I have can be used, or like a lot of people, just a big old spanner and use your best judgment. 11, I need some more fingers. Wheel setup. Now, when you are using clincher wheels, really take your time getting the tyre over the rim. Some tyres are crazy tight and others are like a floppy sock. You can manipulate a tyre when it is warmer because the tyres are rubber and they're more malleable. So don't do it in a freezing cold shed, that won't help. If you have aluminium rims, then use tyre levers to assist if you need. If you have carbon wheels, carbon rims, don't use tyre levers. Also make sure the valve length on the inner tube fits through your rim enough to get the pump onto it. It's too easy to buy tubes with a short valve that simply won't work because you've got a deep section rim. For tubeless setups, you need a way to force a large amount of air into the tyre at once. Something like this air pump that I have will do the trick. Number 12, gear adjustment. Adjust the high and low limit screws first. This controls how far inward the chain can go towards the spokes and how far out it can go towards the frame. You don't want it to go past them, you can ruin spokes or mash your frame up. Now before you try to index all the gears, go through them all loads of times, click through, change them. It all pulls tight over time, so you don't want to do the indexing before that because it will just go out of line basically. Also, don't forget the B tension screw. I know, right? What the hell is that? This decides the distance between the cassette and the jockey wheel. If this isn't correct, then the shifting will probably be relatively poor no matter what. Around 5mm is what works for me. Number 13, torquing bolts. Now on carbon frames, there are torque specs for a lot of bolts. Don't over tighten bolts thinking you can get some extra grip because your seat post is slipping. That can ruin a frame in an instant. If you are torquing 2 bolts up, like the stem bolts for example, or crank arm bolts, don't be an eager beaver like I usually am and tighten 1 bolt fully. Tighten them both gradually so that 1 bolt isn't fully tight and the other not so tight. We want balance, my friends. All this is done with a torque wrench, and some torque wrenches have multiple measures of force on the actual handle, so make sure you are reading Newton meters. It's an easy mistake to make, but again, could be a costly one. Number 14, some things that you may forget to buy. So with hydraulic brakes, you may need an olive and an insert. Now, if like me, you didn't have a clue what that was, it basically goes in the shifter and creates a seal if you're using hydraulic brakes. Normally hydraulic shifters come with them, but on a previous build, we needed to replace them. If we didn't have them to hand, game over for the day. Center lock bolts for disc brakes. Some disc brake rotors don't come with center lock nuts, and I have no idea why. Some wheels don't come with center lock nuts, some do. This can basically leave you nutless, and no one wants to be nutless because it is a pain and you can't get your discs on. Dampening cable for internally routed cables is easy to forget. I've probably forgotten that about 4 times. Headset bearings and spacers that go under the stem can easily be forgotten if they don't come with the frame. If your chain uses a quick link, this normally comes with the chain, but good to have a few spare as well, just in case. Tubeless valves and tubeless tape are another one for your tubeless setup. Some wheels come with valves and tape, some just tape, some nothing. It's certainly easy to forget one. Shifter cable ends as well. Most brake and shifter cable sets come with various ends and protectors, etc. But make sure you do, because again, if you don't have them, you can't proceed. Bottle cages, GPS mount are often things that can slip your mind as well. Number 15, I think. Don't forget that good tools are your best friend. Without them, The job will be nowhere near as refined. They are an additional cost though. Don't forget that in the cost of your build, but think of them as an investment. The more quality tools you have, the less you have to pay the bike shop. You're invested in yourself, saying that you're going to learn and you will maintain and build your bikes in the future. Now you know all the tips and tricks. You can watch me fumble a bike together in this build video, which was my first ever attempt. Then you can watch a pro do it after in this video. Both are great learning experiences. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. Thumbs up if you did. I'll see you in the next one.